All right. Today we are going to discuss two more KOTOR characters, the Disciple and the Handmaiden. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back on board the Ebon Hawk, picking up some more passengers today for our companion journeys. These two could be like the love interest episode here, because you got Mical, the disciple. Love interest for Meetra Surik. You've got Brianna, the handmaiden, the last handmaiden. Also potential love interest for Meetra Surik, depending on how you play the game. But we're gonna talk about these characters. We're gonna talk about the love story of it all here as we go. But yeah, I'm just excited to keep going on our KOTOR2 journey here.
Yeah. I guess we did an episode on Beodur and Visasmar, and maybe we could have titled that one like the preferred love interest, even though Beodur wasn't a love interest. There seems to be a vocal portion of KOTOR2 fans that wish he was, and I am one of them. And I don't know, maybe we could say maybe it's bad to compare this way, but maybe the lesser romance option, that's putting them down, and I feel guilty for that. But maybe the less preferred romantic option. This is bad, so
Yeah,
I'm just gonna stop.
this is bad. We're pouring on top of poor Mical and poor Brianna here. And are they the lesser of the love interests? I don't know. I don't know. Let's talk about it a little bit. So, who should we start with? Cassia, who do we want to get this thing started out with?
How about we discuss Brianna the Handmaiden?
Let's do it. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, so if you played KOTOR 2 and you had a male PC on Telos, the Handmaiden, you would later learn her name was Brianna, would join you. And how do we find her on Telos, Brian?
That's right. Yeah. So Brianna, aka the Handmaiden, or the last Handmaiden, as she's described in some material, she's actually a really cool and really interesting character, which makes me sad that I've never really gotten to explore that too much, because I've always played as a female exile when I've played the game, so I never really got to do much chatting with Brianna here. But Brianna is an Echani and Jedi, was the child of an Echani General Usanis and Jedi Knight Aaron K. And spoiler warning, Jedi Knight Aaron K got exiled. Can't have kids if you're a Jedi, I guess. So basically went on to be kind of adopted by Atris when her father died, dueling Darth Revan, which was probably a bad idea. Don't do that. And yeah, she went to live with her half-sisters under the tutelage and care of Atris, who was not very nice, not a very pleasant caretaker of these girls, I don't think, from the sounds of things. And yeah, worked her way then to Telos, where we meet up with Atris, and we meet up with Brianna here, and Atris's new Jedi temple establishment that she's trying to get set up there, as the Jedi temple on Dantooine is, fallen under disrepair. So she is there doing her bidding, I guess.
Yeah, and she grew up with a lot of girls who looked like her. I don't know if Atris had a dress code. It's your hair needs to look like mine and match mine at all times. It seems like a dark reflection of, Padme and her handmaidens, where it's more like a sisterhood of supportive friends. This one is more like, you're gonna do what I say or else ... So probably not the funnest upbringing for Brianna.
Yeah, absolutely, because Brianna was force sensitive. One of her parents was a Jedi Knight there, but Atris always seemed, from what I read, was totally playing that down and not letting Brianna learn any of that stuff, and totally just keeping her at arm's length on all that stuff, which made her kind of separate and ostracized from her other sisters, even within kind of this small group that we had here on Telos. So yeah, I don't know, not a good look, Atris. You gotta be nicer to your adopted handmaiden troop there.
Yeah, so she kind of has some issues with Atris. She really wants to know who, like, or not really wondering who they were. I think she just wishes she knew her mother, RNK, and everyone. And then she, if you played KOTOR2 as a male character, she joins, and kind of her most definitive traits are like the Ikani fighting ritual, which is where you fight in your underwear. And that's probably one of the cringiest parts of like Star Wars for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then also her jealousy with Visas, the competitiveness there for a man, the exile if he's a male.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you get the duel there. Down. You can't wear any armor, which I guess was free reign to just go straight down to the underwear. So yeah, probably could have handled that a bit different. Maybe there's some sort of tunic, an unarmored tunic they could have worn. I don't know, something like that. So not a good look there. And then yeah, kind of this jealousy angle that we're playing off of Visa Smar there, and the terms of finding love in the male version of the exile there. They had kind of an interesting relationship too, right? Atris tasks Brianna with going with the group, going on to the Ebon Hawk, and traveling to keep an eye on Meetra Surik. And Atris had always, pretty much drummed up the fact that Meetra Surik couldn't be trusted, was a bad person, terrible, don't listen to them. So she was pretty distrusting of the exile from the get-go, but, finally kind of came around because I will say for, kind of this part of the story, the male exile does a much better job, I think, of harboring, empowering Brianna in a way to stand up for herself and to learn about herself. So I guess that's good at least.
Yeah, so I think that the exile, like you say, empowers more of the characters, and I like that. I wish we could have, I don't know, in some ways, like, it kind of seems like the Handmaiden and the Disciples characters are kind of thin because it was just kind of like their characters depended upon like the gender of your player character, so they weren't as developed as they could have been, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wish they could have just played up like the RNK aspect of the Brianna more, and like her kind of finding her own voice outside of being a handmaiden for Atris, and yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, exactly. They are both kind of a little bit thin. We'll talk about that more when we get to Mical here in just a minute. But Brianna has kind of this nice, interesting backstory. It's not quite as fully developed as some of the other characters are, but there is quite a bit there and quite a bit to explore and unpack, which is really unfortunate. Then, that she's just the interest of the male exile, so you don't even get like any of that story if you're playing as a female exile. So that's really unfortunate and kind of a missed opportunity, I think. Especially in terms of storytelling and building out the world, because yeah, they went through the links of giving her kind of this tumultuous upbringing and scandalous from the standpoint of the Jedi Knight having an illegitimate child and stuff like that. So I think that stuff's kind of interesting, but yeah, you completely lose that if you're not playing as the right version of the exile. So I don't know, a little bit to unpack there. And what about as far as the journey then in KOTOR2, right? So we talked about the upbringing a little bit and how that was some missed opportunities to maybe explore some of that. What kind of journey do you think Brianna has in KOTOR2?
I don't know. Because part of me wonders, like, even if, like, the Disciple and the Handmaiden's portions of the story for KOTOR2 were even completed before they just had to, like, launch this baby, into the world unfinished.
Get it out
and
there.
vulnerable. But part of me wonders like if some of the aspects of the story were gonna just be handled in a KOTOR 3 that never happened. But I
Mm-hmm.
guess the lesson learned is like give people complete character arcs like as much as you can like in one thing because like you might not get the next movie, and sometimes it makes stories feel unfinished or like characters feel kind of like not as productive as others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're talking about these in kind of two character pairings here. I think Brianna's arc is a little bit stronger than Mical's. Spoiler warning
For
for when we
sure.
talk about that, but I think she goes through a little bit of growth. I guess, like I mentioned, she's kind of like an outsider in the view of her sisters, and obviously at arm's length with Atris. So I mean, she seems kind of I don't know, almost like depressed and set back kind of from everyone else. She's been totally gaslit by Atris this whole time, so untrusting
Mm-hmm.
of Meetra Surik. But I think kind of as the story progresses, she does, like I said, find a little bit of her own kind of self power and importance and things, and the ability to help Meetra Surik. So I think that there's a little bit of character growth for Brianna, but I wouldn't really necessarily consider it to be a full arc in any sense
No.
of the word. But someone, Meetra Surik obviously has a character arc. So what do you think Brianna's, part or place in Meetra Surik's character journey is?
I think that Brianna is a reminder of Atris. Um, Kind of like she's kind of a spy at first, and then you kind of win her over because you're more of a understanding leader, I think. Um, and there's kind of that connection with RNK. So she was kind of created because of the Mandalorian Wars, but then like because of the Jedi, wasn't able to really grow up with like a loving relationship with her family and parents. So it's interesting. Part of me is like, I hope Brianna is older than I think she is. I think she's 19, and
Mm-hmm.
I have no clue how old the exile's supposed to be. So, like, just kind of thinking about that, I'm like, maybe she shouldn't have been on the romance option table, you know? But,
That's almost as
yeah,
bad as the Revan and Bastila age difference there,
I make
for
it
sure.
different in my head, so it's okay.
That's right. In our heads, everything is all square. But yeah, I like kind of that classification there of her assistance, I guess, in Mitra Surik's character journey. I think that Mitra Surik is able to play kind of a mentor role almost to Brianna, in a way, and to enlighten her to kind of the I don't know, the broader galaxy, right? Has had kind of this tumultuous upbringing, being underneath of Atris's tutelage for better or worse, most definitely worse, and just able to believe in herself a little bit. So I see as Meetra Surik able to fulfill kind of a mentorship role, which I think is a similar role to Mical, because basically these characters are almost interchangeable, right? Because you're just seeing their story depending on if you're a male or a female exile. So a lot of this stuff is going to ring true here in a second.
Yeah.
But as far as the character journeys that goes, there's not a lot there, unfortunately, to unpack. But where do we think that this character ends up after KOTOR2? According to the game, if you go light side, Brianna becomes a Jedi, and if you go dark side, Brianna becomes a dark Jedi. There you go, easy peasy. Uh,
Uh, what would I have liked to happen?
Yeah, that's right. KOTOR 3 time in our heads. What should Brianna have done with her life, really, though?
I think it would have been better if, like, because I don't remember in what, like, old pre Disney book it was, but, like, the history of KOTOR 2 was written to be, like, Brianna, both Brianna and the disciple ended up joining the female exile, which I kind of like because it would have been interesting to see what their dynamic could have been, and maybe they would have been more age appropriate for each other and would have hit it off. Who knows? But what I would have preferred to have happened is that Atris is. I probably should like get someone to create a meme that says like, is it girl boss gaslight gatekeep, or is it gaslight girl boss gatekeep? I forget the order, but like Atris is kind of more like that's kind of her mentality, and then I think the exile would have been like a better maybe role model and someone to help her, like Brianna, empower herself, and like maybe she could have talked to the handmaidens and said like, I know Atris has been telling us a lot of stuff, but it's a lie. And also, she's literally listening to a holocron, like a Sith holocron right now, and is like turning into a dark Jedi. So like
Right.
maybe we should like help the exile and fight against her, and we can do it together as a sisterhood. Like that's what I would have liked to have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, able to kind of come into her own and spread the word of the Ichani and a Jedi throughout the land. I think that would have been a good and fitting ending. Maybe she could take over Atris's little fortress of solitude there on Telos and start her own school up. Maybe that would have been something better. Could have got some more robes and things for when we have to do our fighting duel. That would have been good. That would be good.
Yeah, I asked someone from our friends at the Heroes Journey podcast, Nilsson. I was asking if anyone here had played KOTOR2, and he played it like over a decade ago. And I asked him like if he remembered the Disciple and the Handmaiden, and what they thought of them, and he said like, if I recall, they were always the opposite gender of what you played. So if the PC was female, you got the Disciple, and if it was male, you got the Handmaiden, right? And he said, I think Handmaiden was also a romance quest option, but I remember it not being a very satisfying conclusion. Beyond that, I just remember her being a melee-focused character that I think I turned into a Jedi.
There you go. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, I think that these two characters were kind of created to fulfill sort of the same role, and by splitting their stories in half, you didn't get very much from either one of them. That being said, I think that Brianna is an interesting character, just unfortunately, wasn't able to be, seen to fruition, be that from the time crunch or, just one of those things that happens in video games. You can't you can't have all 9 of the characters, I guess, getting main screen time. So I don't know. Maybe we'll shed some more light on Brianna's story as we go over to the flip side of the coin, and we talk about Mical, aka the Disciple.
Yeah, and then if you had a female exile, the Disciple would end up joining your group on Dantooine, and he's kind of someone who is force sensitive, but because of the Mandalorian Wars, like there was a shortage of like Jedi trainers, and he always wanted to be trained by the exile, but like guess what? She was fighting the Mandalorian Wars and like didn't have time for that. So he ended up aging out, and he's actually a spy for Karth, which is something that I missed a lot, like when I played it growing up. But how would you describe his personality?
His personality is pretty much one note, as he just is really longing and pining for Meetra Surik. He's I don't know, his career progression, I guess, was kind of interesting, right? So he was in the Jedi there, became a Galactic Republic ambassador, wanted to be the Padawan of Meetra Surik, to learn from her, to be close to her, but he's developed, like I said, into this Republic ambassador. He's somewhat of a historian, and that's really what leads him, back to Dantooine into the temples. He gets word that one of the Jedi Masters had returned there before running into us. We don't know very much about Mical, the Disciple. We don't know where he's from, which I think is just something that they omitted when they were making the game. But I think in my own head, we don't know where he's from because when they came and destroyed the Jedi Temple, they lost all those records, all the birth certificates for all the Padawan kids that they scoop up, at birth. They don't know. They don't know where it came from. That's in my head
That
though.
that's a really good headcanon.
I think so.
Yeah, in my mind, like the disciple is like someone who's like the uber good Jedi, but he kind of like maybe presents himself more as like a nerd, and like if he like I don't know, maybe like did his hair a little bit better and like was a bit more fashionable, like people would maybe like get to know the real disciple, and it's like someone who's like a true Jedi, like through and through. Like he
Mm-hmm.
believes in it, but he doesn't just take everything at face value, and he kind of sees like the flaws and like where things need to be fixed.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably a good thing. Is he's, kind of learned and was brought up by the Jedi, but then was able to kind of go out into the galaxy and see different perspectives and things. So I guess that's a good thing and a good way to look at it. And yeah, Mical is reunited with Meetra Surik there on Dantooine now. According to Wikipedia, I don't know, or I've never noticed this myself, and certainly I'm not can't go back and play through the whole game to verify this. But apparently, if you are a male exile, the male exile will refer to Mical as Mical, but if you're a female exile, she only ever refers to him as a disciple. They don't use the name Mical if Meetra Surik is a female. I don't know if that's true or not, but it said it on Wikipedia, so I'm saying it here.
Yeah, Wikipedia is always right. So
That's right.
if they're wrong, that's their fault. No, just kidding. But yeah, because like it took me a while to be like, oh, his name's McCall, but I always pronounced it Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars can be fun like that. But um, yeah, like kind of like with a male exile, like I think like Visas and Brianna are kind of like one's they both wear hoods, but one's sort of like dark sided and one's kind of like light sided. So have fun with that. Like, and it's like okay, and then like with the female exile, it's like one's Han Solo, and then one's kind of like Anakin. So have fun with that, and like that's
That's
kind of
right.
one thing I would if there was an adaptation. Like, I don't know if I would just drop like the romance angle with the
Mm-hmm.
disciple and the exile, or like kind of change it because like the disciple has kind of had a crush on the exile, like, and wanted the exile to be his master. So I'm like, that's kind of a weird dynamic. I think what they were trying to go for is like Anakin's crush on Padme, like in
Yeah.
like the Phantom Menace, where like Anakin kind of puts Padme on a pedestal because and she's kind of older, like 5 years older than him. But I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
just I don't know, like maybe like age him up or kind of change it like that they were kind of both Jedis who were like similar ages, and like
Yeah.
he kind of wanted her to be a Jedi or something. Like I would just change that, like personally. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that would make for a more compelling sort of love angle, I think, if they were more, yeah, more similar in age, more colleague like. Now, it's very possible that Meetra Surik would have been, more advanced and, kind of a higher ranking Jedi potentially. And I think that, maybe he could have looked at that and admired her and, admired her strength. But I think that is a little bit more digestible than was like, oh, I really wanted to be your Padawan and I love you and I love you forever. But that's just me. That's just me. So, carrying on here, going into the character arcs here, does does Mikal, does the disciple, have a character arc at all, Cassia, in this thing?
Um, you discover him, you talk to him, you can find out somehow that he's like reporting to Karth what happens, which isn't really much of a betrayal, because like it's Karth. We know Karth, we trust Karth, or Orange Jacket Daddy.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
he also talks to the exile about like how like he kind of pumps her up and it's like you're a good person, you know. And I think it's a beautiful speech, kind of identical to what I think Visas can say to a male um, exile, but yeah, kind of not really a character arc, and um, I mean we'll kind of discuss this later, but like I really don't know if like KOTOR 2's even like writing was finished and like KOTOR 3 didn't happen, so we kind of just have what we have and we have to like talk about their character arcs, and it's like there is no arc, there are just dots and we have to
Yeah.
connect them together. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't see like hardly any sort of character arc here. The only kind of growth is that he's spent his whole life wanting to learn from Meetra Surik, and I guess he gets to finally do that. So it's a happy ending there for that. Yeah, so not a lot there. I do think that he plays kind of an interesting part in Meetra Surik's kind of hero heroine's journey. I think that he is like this representation of what her life would have been like had she not gone off with Revan. So I guess that there's that she gets to go back and kind of look at the crossroads where she decided to go off to war as opposed to stay in the Jedi Council. So kind of a potential branching path, kind of a look there maybe. I don't know, but that's it's pretty thin for Mical here. But I think that kind of the end game stuff for him is more interesting. Actually has some stuff here, Cassia. So for the light side ending, Mical goes on to be a Jedi Master, is on the Council. He played a part in restoring the Lost Archives, and actually goes on then into SWOTOR. They talk about Mical's holocron, which talks about rebuilding all of this stuff. And the dark side ending, he apparently becomes like a Darth Sidious-esque politician, which I think is kind of interesting. So
That
basically
would have been so cool. And like
yeah.
it would have been cool to see that dynamic, honestly. But I think like just like with the disciple, they kind of just say like he was a really good Jedi Master but reluctant to join the council like all good men are. And I think they're like, and he will always like have a crush on you, and it's like, oh, okay, cool.
Okay, great. Love that for myself. But yeah, so basically what I've kind of gathered here in doing kind of this character study on these two characters is Brianna has kind of a more interesting backstory, who she was, her upbringing, how she got to the events of KOTOR2. Then not a lot happens, and then she has basically nothing for the after game, right? It's very basic as can be. It's as basic as Atris and her temple stuff going on there. And on the flip side of that, we have Mical, who doesn't really have any backstory at all, very basic story, and then has kind of this interesting after game. So my theory is that maybe this was supposed to be one character, and they ended up splitting it into two, and I don't know if that's because of the ramifications for the love interests. I don't know for sure, but that's my theory, is that they were going down the path of having one kind of fully realized character and ended up splitting it in two, so we got two kind of thin characters, unfortunately.
Yeah, and maybe, yeah, it's like I have a better title for this pair. It's like they deserved better. So
they deserved better for sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
But fortunately for us, we got better because we got a lot of really good feedback on our Discord, and some former guests on the podcast who'd asked us some questions, or made some comments kind of about Mical and Brianna, which is really important because, like I said, there wasn't a lot to discuss character-wise for these two. So before we jump into those, was there any kind of final thoughts on either Mical or Brianna, Cassia?
That's a really good thought that you have, is like maybe they were one character divided into two and like it was just kind of unsatisfying. I never thought about that, but it would be interesting to hear like how these characters were created when they decided to just make them kind of gender exclusive.
Because yeah, I think that there's potential for, had it been one character, it would have been far more interesting, almost akin to Visas Mari we talked about in the last one of these. Was such an interesting character with a nice rich backstory and a real purpose for being involved in the story. And these two were much thinner in that sense, and they're meant to be kind of the other a love interest for the characters, but really there's so much less going on with both of these when you compare them to Atten and to Visas. So
I guess did you want to start with one of our comments?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple here. One is from Jake, who had mentioned before, had been on the podcast, and one is from CCIWE, Chewy, I guess, maybe, I don't know how that's pronounced for sure. Let us know. But Jake wants to know, how would you have completed the Disciples' role in the story, since even with the restored content mod, it's not finished? And then Chewy says on top of that, how the Handmaiden storyline is far more complete, even with the restored content mod. So what do you think? Was there a way just that you would have maybe enhanced the Disciple story to make them a more interesting character, and why do you think his story seems less interesting maybe than Brianna's to people looking just at what we got in the game?
I wonder if in 2004 that they didn't even consider that some people would want the female exile, and maybe they're just like, oh, just complete like the male exile more because we'll have more male players. Even though I don't think like Brianna's story is like we're still kind of like, what's her character arc? And it's like IDK, like it's kind
right.
of like advanced calculus, and we don't do math, but it is interesting, like if they were one character divided into two, and I mean, it was a rush development, so that's interesting, but that kind of, like, got me thinking, like, we kind of just kind of learned their fates, like, from Kreia at the end on Malachor, and, like, I kind of just was wondering, like, if they had Kreia's epilogue, like, basically her spewing out everyone's fate, like, a really long death scene to fill in some of the blanks of KOTOR2's story.
Yeah, because we don't really get to see it or, have any effect on the game from, kind of the way that these characters' stories go. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I will say kind of, the Handmaiden story, being more complete than Mical's. I think that's kind of partially true. I think, she's a much more interesting character, but I think that is heavily reliant on kind of her backstory, and that we can associate her with Atris, and kind of that story. So she has kind of some more anchors within Meetra Surik's own story to kind of latch onto, whereas Mical really doesn't. He's just kind of just kind of floating out there, just longing for the days so when Meetra Surik would show up to the Jedi Temple and do some training, I guess. I don't know. So I think that it seems extra thin for him from that standpoint. And to Jake's kind of question there, how would we have completed the Disciples story? I actually think that his endgame story is pretty good. I like that. I would have liked, had the character's story within the game. If we could have started learning that, or started leaning towards that, or have given Mical some sort of political sense or ambition, or something like that, or we talked about the fact that he was a historian, and actually that was one of the other things. Brianna and the Handmaidens were kind of like archaeologists almost, which is another reason that I think that maybe they were supposed to have been just the one character there. So I think it would have been interesting. I think Mical would have been more interesting in the first Knights of the Old Republic when we're going through the tombs, and maybe his historical sensibilities could have been an interesting story dynamic for that. But I don't know. It's hard to think of how thin kind of their stories were in enhancing anything about their end game. So I don't know.
That would have been so cool if they like played up his historian angle, because I love history, and Star Wars needs more historians. Like I guess we have like Dr. Affer, right? But if the Disciple were like that, kind of like a space archaeologist, like he's like, being a Jedi didn't work out for me, but I'm an archaeologist. Like, I think people would be like, he's cool. I want him on my team, you know?
Sticking with Jake, he asked a second question here, which is, I think we've already kind of talked about a little bit, but he's wanting to know, was the Handmaiden a necessary addition to the team, character-wise? Do you think that having Brianna in the game as part of the crew of the Ebon Hawk, do you think that it was important for her to be there? Did she play any sort of pivotal role in our story or not?
I think her connection to the exile is the most tenuous. Maybe Goto's a little more tenuous. I just don't like Goto, which is hilarious because if you go to our Patreon, like, he was voted like my companion out of all of them, and it's like, cool, that's really awesome. But yeah, I don't know, like, there's just not really that many tethers for her, like, in the present. Like, in the past, maybe I can see that, but it's kind of just more like she's defined by other people, which I don't like.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that she really plays any sort of super vital role, character-wise, within the story, other than just giving you an option as a love interest. Like I just kind of brought up, she's more anchored by the fact that she has a relationship with Atris, so it kind of keeps tying back into that, and you don't even get that then if you're playing as a female exile. So yeah, I don't know. The Handmaiden could have stayed on Telos, but I'm glad. Even though it didn't do anything in the game that much in my eyes, I'm glad we could get her out of there, because no one should have to hang out with Atris all day.
Yeah, and then I asked CCIWE. We will say maybe like Chewie, but I asked them, like, do you like her story? I thought they should have played up the RNK, maybe Kreia connection, and dialed back on the romance, and I got this response. While I agree that the romance was a bit much, I still prefer her storyline over the Disciples, because at least she's a character beyond her relationship with the exile. She offers an interesting moral dilemma when it comes to which path she should take. Should she honor her oath as far as possible, since it has defined so much of her for a big part of her life, Kantian alternative, or should she make the choice that is best for herself and the galaxy while betraying her family and a part of her identity? Also, her rivalry with Visas was far more interesting than the rivalry between Atten and the Disciple. So I'm going to ask you the most important question is, like, who did you like to see fight more? Visas and the Handmaiden, or Atten and the Disciple?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, it's very just kind of this bickering sense, I guess, that you would think of in some sort of like YA drama, maybe. I don't.
It was 2004. It was another time.
It was 2004. It was another time. Yeah, I mean, it was a product of its time, and I don't know if one was more interesting. I guess, yeah, I would say that Visas and Brianna is a more interesting dynamic, because Mical just sits in that one room on the Ebon Hawk. You don't ever take him out to fight or anything. He just stays there and hangs out all day. You at least, Atten has some sort of story and agency, and yeah, so I mean, he's far more interesting to talk to, more interesting to train. So yeah, I mean, I guess because I find Brianna a more interesting character than Mical, I think that's fair. Statement.
Yeah, and the way that Chewie describes the Handmaiden is so much more interesting than what we got in the game. Like bringing like Kant into it, and because like really at some points I'm like, did they like just want her there to fight in her underwear or what? But yeah, like if KOTOR2 could have not been rushed and we got KOTOR3, I just kind of wonder what kind of discussion we'd be having.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a completely different discussion for sure, because I think that KOTOR2 has, probably the more interesting kind of overall of the characters, but unfortunately we just got to learn, less about them even than our KOTOR1 characters who we so dearly love for sure. So yeah, there's a lot to think about when you think about the wasted potential for something else going forward to kind of tie all of this stuff together.
Yeah, and the Gabe Young, who we had on for our Korriban and our Batman episode, says that the gender implications of having one over the other, why women protagonists by convention get the man character disciple, while man protagonists get the women handmaiden. And he also adds, like, although, albeit I understand the Ikani ritual, I believe it may be proper to discuss the gaming's portrayal of women characters and how the handmaiden is portrayed. So I guess, like, two questions. Like, do you think, like, should players have gotten a choice, like, about which one they wanted to join? Or would you just have both of them join? Or do you think there was an interesting... was it interesting for the player to get an opposite gendered companion? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that it was, certainly kind of a product of its time, even though we'd seen some same-sex relationship stuff starting to be explored with Juhani and the first Knights of the Old Republic, and then obviously KOTOR2 was Obsidian, but BioWare then went on to do Mass Effect, which had same-sex relationships that were explorable in that game. So I think that maybe that was part of it. I think that we've kind of discussed that the potential for having Mical and Brianna have been one character as opposed to these two characters would have been more interesting. And then that would have, created a completely different dynamic where you just have the one that you take on board and have to explore that relationship, either way, I think. But yeah, I think it's just, unfortunately, that's just kind of the status of the gaming. And hopefully that's changing. We've seen a lot more, diversity in terms of race and sexual orientation in games, and hopefully that continues, and hopefully if we see carry-ons of this story that's much more well represented for for more groups of people out there for sure. But yeah, I think it was just a product of the 2004 landscape, unfortunately. I think I don't it's definitely not making an excuse for it or anything like that, but I think that was just what the game developers and studios had in their heads probably at the time, and maybe that was what led to it being two characters as opposed to one. I don't know, couldn't say.
Yeah. And then what do you think of KOTOR2's like portrayal of female characters, and like overall, do you think the handmaiden is portrayed well?
I think maybe kind of overall she's kind of portrayed well, as she's able to learn and kind of come into her own. But certainly, at the offset, when you very first meet and they're like, okay, we have to have a duel now, take off all of your armor, which apparently also includes all of your clothes. That's not great. I mean, even just talking about KOTOR2 in the first place, when you wake up on Paragus there, I think you're in your underwear too until you can go and find armor to put on, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, so I mean, from that standpoint, that's not great. That's not something that's ever really been great within video games or the sci-fi fantasy realms out there, just in general, and has gotten a little bit better, but definitely some more room to improve there, I think. But what about you? I'm a white guy, so I don't want to say, and speaking on behalf of the way women are portrayed. What do you think, Cassia?
I think that KOTOR1, the female characters were portrayed they were fleshed out more, and I think a bit more realistically, and I think there were less like fantasy, like male fantasies in KOTOR1. I mean, some things have aged poorly, but I mean, that's kind of just the way everything kind of shakes out like years later usually. But just kind of like thinking about KOTOR 2, it's like Mira is kind of like, yeah, I dress in this provocative outfit to distract males while I'm a bounty hunter. And I'm like,
right.
if she wants to wear that, fine. But like, I don't know. Like, it kind of just seemed a little bit more male fantasy. And then like the handmaiden fighting in her underwear, I'm like, that's maybe like a traditionally male fantasy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, like I just kind of remembered those aspects from KOTOR2, and I'm like, maybe they're not great, you know, and maybe like if there were options, you know, like maybe if like Mira was like, yes, I actually like kind of prefer women, you know, or something like where that was made kind of more explicit, like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or like they could have just made different ways for the handmaiden to show her personality that could have been more interesting. But I guess we have what we have. But I kind of think like the female characters were maybe portrayed a little bit better in KOTOR 1.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree with that there. And then let's see. I think we have one more question here. This is from our resident musician Dennis, who's been on several episodes with us now, talking about music. Does the music for the podcast and a bunch of other awesome projects. So make sure you check out Dennis S. Mowers out there. But he wants to know if we could talk about the dynamic or what the dynamic between the two of these characters would have been, considering it's canon that they both travel with the exile. But in the game, they don't travel. Mical either stays on Dantooine or Brianna stays on Telos there. So what do we think? Would they have been pals on board the Ebon Hawk? What do you think, Cassia?
Oh, that is so fascinating. Um, because maybe they originally were one character, and like part of me when Dennis asked that question, I'm like, should I resist the urge to ship them? Should I, like, I don't know why my mind goes there first, you know. I guess I just love, you know, and you can check out our Boba Fett, you know, like Valentine's
Mm-hmm.
Day special. But um it would be interesting because I think they would be more age appropriate for each other. Like they're kind of like similar ages. Like
Mm-hmm.
so I do kind of see like a friendship kind of like being more plausible there, and like they kind of have a little bit of similar um backgrounds because like the disciple was kind of just raised among Jedi. He did kind of get out and see the world, but like it kind of just seems like he's someone who just stays in his apartment, you know, when he's not actively doing something, like just kind of shy, doesn't really get out as much, you know. And then like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of seems like Brianna's sort of been raised in a high demand, you know, cult thing, like where it's kind of just like Atris is like kind of dictating everything and they all dress the same and all that, you know.
Right.
So maybe there would be tension because like you know, like Atris had told uh Brianna that the exile wasn't a good person, and like the disciple seems to have really like looked up to the exile, and like maybe they could just kind of like see different ways of looking at things, you know, like, and maybe they would like Michael is kind of more interested in history, you know, and that's kind of what Atris did. So it's like maybe she could be like, well, Atris did it this way, and the disciples like, oh, Atris did it that way, you know. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what I see. What do you see?
Yes, similar kind of thing there. They have, kind of similar stories, unfulfilled Jedi potential and learning. Both have studied history and been into archaeology and artifacts, that kind of thing. One is deeply in love with the Meetra Surik. One is very wary of Meetra Surik. So that's kind of a clash there, but something that they would have potential to talk about. on board the Ebon Hawk as everyone else is going off on the adventures and no one is talking to them because they're too busy with that and visas. That's possible there, but yeah, I think that they would have gotten along and kind of would have been someone they could have confided in, probably on board, because these two are were kind of outsiders, before being united with Meetra Surik, and I think that probably in terms of the quote unquote friend group here on the Ebon Hawk, which is by all accounts not very friendly, certainly not as friendly as the Knights of the Old Republic one crew. I think that they both would probably be kind of outsiders on board the ship as well. So I think that they would get along swimmingly, as it were. How do you rectify that in terms of the canon that they both traveled with? I don't know. You're just gonna have to go out on a limb.
They
and
just
assume
both
that
join the crew.
That's right. They just both joined the crew, and they were in there. And maybe there's some potential sparks that could fly for the disciple and the handmaiden. I don't know. That's possible. That's a good love story we should explore one day. Maybe that'll be next up on the Old Republic podcast. I don't know.
Yeah. And yeah, like, I kind of maybe forgot to mention, like, it just would have been cool to see that, like, if Kreia and the Handmaiden talked a little bit more. But yeah, I don't know if that would have been addressed in KOTOR 3. It's like, Kreia might have been my mom, probably was. Like, she went evil, and how does she deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, I just kind of see them being a little, the disciple and the handmaiden being a little bit more similar in ages and upbringings, and possibly might overlap in interests a bit more. Like, I just kind of am able to visualize, like, the handmaiden talking to the disciple a little bit easier than, like, Atten, so.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of characters on the thinner side of their story, but still interesting, still an integral parts of your Knights of the Old Republic 2 journey. So I think it was good to talk about them, and we definitely got some good feedback on this one. So if you're listening out there, drop us a comment on the YouTube video, or on social media, or come over to the Discord and let us know what you think about the Disciple and Brianna the Handmaiden. And let us know what you think about the character journeys here for KOTOR2 so far. So, any closing thoughts here for this pair as we set off to pick up our next two companions?
I was so glad to get a lot of, like, comments and questions on these characters, because there's really, like, in the game, not a lot that happens to them. So we were very appreciative for all your comments and questions. And then for Brian, I have two like, lightning round questions, because we didn't discuss what kind of pie Atten and T3 would like in the first episode. So Atten's pie, what would he have?
That is a really good question. Let's see. Atten loves to play Pazak, so I'm going to say he's going to go with, like, a hand pie, maybe like a McDonald's pie. So he could hold it in one hand, hold his Pazak cards in the other hand. Probably something pretty basic. Maybe just like an apple pie, I think, for Atten. That sounds good to me. T3, what kind of pie does T3 eat? T3 is a droid, therefore doesn't need to eat a pie. But let's see. Since T3 is the best, I will go with banana cream pie, because that's one of my favorite kind of pies. So that's what I'm going to gift to T3. What do you think, Cassia? What do you think about Atten and T3's pie of choices?
Yeah, so Atten isn't for everyone, and, like, when I think of pies that maybe aren't for everyone, I think of lemon pies, because it is an interesting taste, but it's a little tart. You just have to get used to it, and, like, he's also a sentinel with a yellow lightsaber, so, like, lemon is yellow, so, like, there's my scholarship there, so it's like, yeah, because it's yellow.
There you go.
And then
like it.
T3 probably wouldn't have a pie. But like, what if he had like an ice cream pie or something? Like, just
Okay.
to, I don't know. I want T3 to have a pie, but he doesn't need a pie. Like, I wish I lived in a world where like I could like just give T3 everything because he deserves the world and more. But
Maybe
maybe
he
that's not
froze.
possible. Yeah.
Maybe he froze the pie on accident with his carbonite blaster there.
Yeah. And then gave it to the exile. It's like, oh, that's such a sweet moment. Like, but yeah, okay. And now question two: pies for the handmaiden and the disciple. What are they?
All right, so Brianna, this one's easier. I'm going to say that she's going to have some sort of like chocolate pie, like sort of thing, because Atris would never let any of the handmaidens have a chocolate pie because it would get on your white outfit, and that would be no good. So I'm going to go with a chocolate pie for Brianna, and for Mical is going to I don't know. He's going to pick the most boring slice of pie that is in the counter that no one else would ever think of picking, like a rhubarb pie. Maybe rhubarb pie is delicious. I don't know. I can't speak from experience, so I'm gonna go with that for Mical, rhubarb pie.
Okay, so I think that Brianna would go with a blueberry pie. Like, I just think she would find it tasting good. Like I don't know why, but just when I was thinking, I was just like, it's blueberry, and that's my concluding argument is because it is.
Because it is.
Um, and then I was kind of like, oh, what's Mical? And it's like, it's apple pie. Because like if you ask Captain America what his favorite pie flavor is, he'd probably say apple pie. And like, I don't know, I kind of get the he McCall kind of reminds me of like Captain America and Superman,
Yeah,
So I'm like, probably something traditional, not like anything like seemingly special, Maybe like some people out there are very passionate about apple pie, but I'm like, he's probably an apple pie person. So yeah.
that's right. His Mical's favorite type of pie is whatever Meetra Surik was having one day at the Jedi Council,
Oh.
and he saw her eating it, and therefore that became his favorite pie of all time.
Oh boy. So yeah, we are very passionate about pies, and yeah, if you have any comments about what pie flavors certain characters would like, let us know. So yeah,
Let us know your favorite kind of pie. So.
all right, and may the pie be with you always.